Tonight, things have never been worse, but let me tell you why I'm optimistic. It's September 20th, and this is the Ezra Levant Show.
Shame on you, you censorious thug.
All right, I just said that things have never been worse, and obviously that's not true. There was a disaster of the 20th century, World War I, World War II, the Cold War, nuclear war. There were terrible things that happened. So when I say things have never been worse, that's not literally true, but many things about our society have decayed over the last 10 years in Justin Trudeau, some accidentally, some absolutely on purpose. We had a setback yesterday. The Federal Court of Canada ruled against us when we applied to get the QCJO news license. It's absurd that a court would even have jurisdiction over that. It's absurd that a government would even try to regulate that. What do either of those institutions have to do with our freedom of the press? The fact that we have to convince a judge that we had more than 2% of our journalism be original. What an absurd statement to begin with. But I don't want to get demoralized. First of all, I do think we have a real chance on appeal, but here's why I feel optimistic despite that disaster, despite the disaster of 2 million immigrants to Canada a year and all that portends, despite the fever pitch of wokeness, despite the bad news overseas in foreign affairs, despite the news that I see Justin Trudeau will resume pushing Bill C-63, the Online Harms Act, through Parliament on Monday. Why do I feel optimistic about it? Well, I just recorded a feature interview with our friend Aaron Gunn. That's after the break. So I filmed today's show out of order. And he's talking about the state of the Canadian military. And it's a disaster. It truly hasn't been this weak, relatively, I think, since Canada was born. And one should be desperate, one should be disconsolate over what's going on. And yet I feel hope because I think that in about a year from now, a very hard rain is going to fall. And so many of the people who have had free rein in this country to try out their disastrous experiments are going to be washed away. Now, there's the problem of the Senate, which we will have to deal with. All those partisan time bombs being planted by Justin Trudeau to foil what Pierre Poilievre does. That will be a constitutional crisis that's looming. But put aside that important asterisk, I really do feel some hope. I mean, let me give you the example of the censorship, the QCJO journalism license or the Bill C-63 Online Harms Act, both of which are a civil liberties disaster. It's true. But let's say Trudeau rams through C-63 in a few months. All right. And it is proclaimed into law perhaps in the new year. And it takes a few months for these new censorship machineries to staff up, to hire the new prosecutors and the new judges. By the time that's ready to go, I would think we're going to have the next election. And like I say, there's no sure thing. Something could come up to intervene. But I'm hopeful that even if we're not able to slap down these censorship laws in court or in Parliament, that the new government will simply throw them out, that there will be a reset and a repeal of the worst things. I see a little bit of that when it comes to immigration, a boldness led by the provincial premiers, including Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith. I see even Pierre Poilievre starting to take baby steps at saying, no, we've got to bring those numbers down. Well, let me put it this way, even the Liberals are admitting they have to bring the numbers down. Wokeness is off the charts. Well, it's starting to go in retreat in other countries. In the United Kingdom, they have backed away from gender reassignment surgeries on young people, at least. I see even a twinkle of hope in foreign affairs. I mean, you have to marvel at the high-tech spycraft that Israel apparently used against Hezbollah terrorists this week, where new low-tech pagers that Hezbollah ordered because they didn't want Israel to be able to hack their smartphones. So they went back to an older beeper technology. Well, those beepers had explosive charges put in there. And these were handed out to all the Hezbollah terrorists, thousands of them. And then all at once, Israel managed to send a text message a pager message to all of them. And when they pushed the button, it blew it up, killing many terrorists and injuring thousands. I understand there may have been 2 civilians that were killed, and that's a shame, of course. That's a collateral damage that is sad when civilians die in war. But frankly, eliminating what I heard 2,800 terrorists with just 2 collateral damage, human casualties, is a miraculous ratio that perhaps has never been done in the course of war before, and it's a tribute to Israel's security services for doing that. I think that in a significant manner degrades the possibility for Hezbollah to commit war. Imagine if we could have done that to Al-Qaeda or ISIS in the past. Push a button, have thousands of terrorists pick up their secret phone and have it blow up on them. I mean, if you did a James Bond movie, that might be implausible. It's too outrageous. I tell you, you have to hang on to these things. I tell you all this because although things have never been worse, I think things will get better. I don't know what's going to happen in the United States. Polls suggest that Donald Trump is still in the fight, something you wouldn't have thought, let's say, a year ago when they were trying their lawfare on him. They were trying to jail the guy. I'm a little bit hopeful. Look, you've got to be hopeful. If you're a reformer, if you're a dissident, you must be hopeful. If you were a pessimist, you wouldn't even bother trying to change things. I'm an optimist because I try to change things, and with your help, we'll keep fighting to do so. Fighting to tell you the other side of the story, and fighting for our rights and yours when they're infringed. All right, next up, our friend Aaron Gunn.
This free episode of the Ezra Levant Show is brought to you by
the news event of the year. Canada's most controversial premier sits down with Canada's most controversial journalist, and everything is on the table. Come watch Ezra Levant one-on-one with Alberta Premier Danielle Smith in front of a live studio audience in Calgary. Nothing's off limits. Nothing's held back. Questions that would make Justin Trudeau invoke martial law. Answers that will make Stephen Guilbeault pee his pants. You're not going to want to miss this one, but you have to be there in person at the Rebel News Live mega conference in Calgary on October the 5th. Tickets are limited, so drop everything and go to rebelnewslive.com right now. Special discounted prices for Patriots and special extra high prices if you're with the CBC. Go to rebelnewslive.com now.
You know, it's interesting to look at the talent that Pierre Poilievre has cobbled together in his caucus and in the candidates that are going to be running in the upcoming election. It's very interesting. It's a new generation of conservatives, and they're from different backgrounds, different skills. One of the candidates I'm going to keep my eyes on, I mean, I think a lot of them are going to win. You look at the polls, it's going to be a wipeout, almost Kim Campbell style for Justin Trudeau. But I'm thinking, well, who might make cabinet and who might have this role or that role? It's interesting to see the backgrounds. And I'm an old timer now. I can't believe it. I'm older, I think, than a vast chunk of the crop of candidates who will be deploying in the next election. But one of my favorite guys, and this won't surprise you to hear it because he's such a frequent guest on our show, is our friend Aaron Gunn, the filmmaker, the independent documentary maker, who is so articulate, and not just articulate with words, but he marshals the power of visuals, which is something that I have to tell you, a generation ago, conservatives did not do. We didn't have people with that kind of creative, artistic imagination. The left always had sort of a monopoly on the cultural tools, like movies and TV shows. And I think part of it is a democratization of the arts through YouTube and social media, where basically anybody with a cell phone can become a filmmaker. And so you're unlocking talent because you removed the gatekeepers in Hollywood, or whatever the Toronto version of Hollywood is. And Aaron Gunn is a formidable storyteller in his own right. And you strap that on the back of a member of parliament. Now you're cooking with gas. What a pleasure to be joined again, this time in his capacity as a candidate for the Conservative Party of Canada in the riding of North Island Powell River. I'm talking about Aaron Gunn. Aaron, great to see you again.
Thank you so much for having me, Ezra. It's great to be here and chatting with you today.
Right on. Well, I know you're in Campbell River. What a wonderful little town. I'd call it the fishing capital of BC. And folks, if you ever have a chance, if you want to do some salmon fishing, and you're basically guaranteed to get fish out there, it's a great Canadian vacation. I've taken my family and myself. Anyways, the reason we're having you, Aaron, besides talking about the Campbell River, is you've got a new, I'm going to call it a feature film. It's probably has a different characterization that, but it's a powerful film. It's about our military. It's called Forsaken Warriors, How Trudeau Broke Canada's Military. Why don't you give us about a minute intro, and then we'll play the trailer for people.
Yeah, well, thanks for that, Ezra. So the film, this is one that I've been wanting to make for a while. I served a 3 years in the Canadian Army Reserves. I've always had a lot of fondness and passion for Canada's military, and it's really shameful how we've treated both the current crop of men and women in uniform, but also our veterans. So the film starts out first looking back in time at just how great this military was. World War I, population of 7 million. We put about 700,000 into uniform. World War II, we put over 1 million men and women into uniform. And starting in about the 60s, Pearson and then Trudeau Sr. Began the long and gradual decline that has been exponentially increased under this current government. The state of the military, we look at the state of its equipment, more than half of the Army's vehicles unusable. Country of 40 million, we maybe have 12 fighter jets that we can call up at any given time. Our Arctic is completely unguarded. And then we take a deep dive both into the treatment of our veterans and also this new almost attempt to replace the warrior culture within the CAF, within the Canadian Armed Forces, with all these bizarre new woke policies, including changes to the forces' dress codes that were now partially repealed, and all sorts of accusations leveled throughout the ranks. So that's we cover everything from the state of the equipment to recruitment to retention, ability to project power abroad, to protect our own sovereignty here at home, and also some of the cultural changes that have led to many people to leave, quite frankly.
Wow, you've covered so many amazing issues there. I didn't know that you had served for 3 years in the reserves. So that's great. I mean, obviously, that gives you a deep understanding here, but I think it also speaks to your character and your service to the country. I was just reading a story the other day, I think it may have been by Cosmin Georgia at True North, about how the military is now investigating anyone who was against this bizarre decision by the Canadian Armed Forces to put tampon dispensers in men's bathrooms, that those objectors are being investigated for hate and extremism. It's just out of the corner of my eye. I think I saw a story about that. So you're so right. I mean, I hate to say it, you want guys. You want men who are fit and have a sober-minded warrior mentality. It is not the place for woke experimenting. And I think that it started with Pierre Trudeau, the disrespect. It's a moral disrespect for the armed forces. And Trudeau had that for many of our institutions. And I'm so glad you remind us of the history, because that is part of our identity they're trying to raise to zero. That when you topple statues, when you topple and you rewrite history, it's because you're trying to make people forget who they are. Enough intro. Let's watch the trailer together. We're watching a trailer to Aaron Gunn's new film, Forsaken Warriors. Let's take a look.
Current and former defense officials are raising alarms about the state of the Canadian military.
Almost half of this country's military equipment is unavailable.
What is the state of Canada's forces today in your view?
It's pitiful. Current security threats going, we are woefully unprepared.
The institution has lost its way.
The Canadian Armed Forces are in a state of disrepair, of crisis.
Half of the Army's vehicles and trailers are parked against a fence because they don't have the spare parts to keep them going.
We have an Army that has no anti-aircraft capability.
The Navy is struggling to have 3 elderly frigates at sea at once. And it goes on and on and on.
It seems like every time
No, it doesn't seem like it. It's absolute fact that every time the Liberals are in power, they strip away more and more of our military culture.
DEI gets people killed. It is literally the plague of the service right now.
There are certain occupations where if you don't go with meritocracy, it's dangerous.
It's blatant partisan politics.
We're degrading operational capability because we're doing all this other stuff.
When I walk through bases, sometimes I shake my head and I got to bite my tongue.
This government is not serious about defense, which means our allies aren't happy.
We had been important. It was inconceivable that they would come together and form NATO without us being a part of it. Today, I don't think we'd ever get an invitation to the table. That reputation is going up in smoke unless we do something to turn it around.
Their treatment of the armed forces right now is appalling.
When people sacrifice and spill their blood and watch their friends blow up in front of them and the government just kind of goes, thanks for coming out, we're nothing more than a dollar, something to spend money on. If we weren't there, they'd be able to save, right?
You could come back bound to a wheelchair with no help and services for the rest of your life.
Holy smokes. Wow, that looks amazing. The first thing that stands out to me is you are talking to serious people there. I think I recognized Vice Admiral Mark Norman amongst the senior brass. I didn't quite remember the name of the fellow with the white hair who's a very senior military man. Who are some of those? I recognize Peter MacKay. I recognize David Burkeson. Tell me some of those. Peter MacKay, of course, former defense minister. This was not you just working on this in your home. You went out there and met with some of the most senior military people, very, very senior, in fact. Tell me some of the folks you talked to.
Yeah, well, it's not, as I try to do with these documentaries, it's not, Aaron Gunn's view of the world. It's going out to try to talk to the experts, the people that are living this, that are closest to the issues, and then bring the truth of what they know to as many Canadians as possible. So in that trailer, you would have seen, in addition to Mr. MacKay there, the former Minister of Defense, also the former military heads of the Army, Navy, and Air Force. So that's as well as Lieutenant General Maisonneuve, who I think you're referencing. You mentioned Vice Admiral Norman, who was obviously prosecuted and failed prosecution by the government. Lieutenant General Hood, former head of the Royal Canadian Air Force, and also Lieutenant General Andrew Leslie, who was the head of the Canadian Army.
That's who it was. Yeah, I recognized him there, and he used to be a Liberal MP.
Liberal MP, the whip actually of the caucus, and he had probably the most stinging criticism for this current prime minister and their cabinet making the decisions right now around national defense. We also went down to Washington D.C., talked to the assistant deputy of defense, former very senior Pentagon official Elbridge Colby, as well as I think a deputy ambassador to Canada formerly, who's now retired, to talk about how much our international reputation has taken a hit and how we're kind of viewed, completely unseriously around the major capitals of the world.
That is the heartbreaking part. There was a time when we were, I think after World War II, I think we had the third or fourth largest Navy in the world. Canada actually once had an aircraft carrier. It's hard to believe. We had our own beach on D-Day, just like the Brits and the Yanks. We had Juno Beach. We were even there in Korea. And for a while there, while we were in decline, we still boasted. The Liberals used to boast about how we were big into peacekeeping. And you can have your opinions about peacekeeping. I sure do. But at least it was a commitment and it was a symbol. I don't even think there's any Canadian peacekeepers. I mean, there's some forces, I think, in the Baltics right now. But I don't think, and Trudeau put some folks, I think, in Mali for a year. But I actually don't think we have any peacekeepers deployed anywhere in the world right now. And that picture, there was that one image of the grown-ups, I think that was in the G7 or NATO, huddled together talking, and there was Trudeau off to the side, because I guess he had already told his cool joke about his socks, and he had already, done all the party tricks, and they'd already all seen them. So the grown-ups were talking. You sit at the kids' table, but I'm using metaphors here, but it's a fact. There's this new group called AUKUS, Australia, UK, U.S., we're not in it. We used to be part of the Five Eyes. It was like the Super Friends. It was like the inner circle of good guys. We're not really included in things anymore because everyone knows Justin Trudeau has allowed the Chinese government to infiltrate the highest offices of the land. That trailer alone reminds of about 10 different crises altogether. That's wow. How long's the movie?
The movie, it's the longest film I put together yet, but there was just so much, unfortunately, so much disaster to reveal. So I think it's just over an hour and a half. You touched on some really important points there. When it comes to AUKUS, this alliance, this both military alliance and technology sharing partnership with significant economic benefits signed between Australia, the U.S., and the United Kingdom. Not only are we not in it, we weren't even invited. I remember growing up in social studies class, Ezra, there was a lot of talk about Canada always punching above its weight in world history and on the international stage. And as Vice Admiral Mark Norman put it, in order to measure the weight or the power of the punch, you have to be in the ring. And we're not even in the ring right now. We're not even sitting at the table where these decisions are being made. And we're not a small country. We're a G7 country. Another thing that came up quite prominently when I was down in Washington interviewing senior American and international officials is there's growing talk about maybe Canada should be kicked out of the G7. If we can't pull our weight around the world, if we can't pull our weight in defense, why shouldn't another country, as Albert Colby put it to me, why should another country like South Korea be in the G7 instead? So these are conversations that are happening. Allies are frustrated. And again, even international scene aside, we can't even protect our own borders right now. We had a Chinese weather spy balloon, whatever you think. The Americans had to shoot it down for us over our own sovereign territories. So that's how bad things have gone.
This free episode of the Ezra Levant Show is brought to you by...
Now I'm standing in front of a massive 47-foot long billboard alongside of Alberta's busiest highway, Highway 2. This thing gets 1.3 million monthly impressions every single month, and it's spreading the word far and wide about the new Rebel News cruise. So if you're thinking about joining us in June 2025 to Alaska, act now because it's going to fill up fast. We're sailing on the Holland America cruise line, which means you can expect top-notch service and luxury while you're on board. But the real excitement, the special Rebel News only events. So what are you waiting for? Head over to rebelnewscruise.com, check out the cabins, see the details, and grab your spot before they're gone. I can't wait to see you there so that we can spend an unforgettable week with some of the best people on the planet, Rebel News supporters. Let's make 2025 the year we come together, have an amazing time, and keep fighting for truth and for freedom. See you on the Rebel News Cruise. Go to rebelnewscruise.com today for cabins and details. For Rebel News, I'm Sheila Gunn-Reid.
Yeah, the other day I saw Bill Baer make an announcement that we're training F-16 Ukrainians on F-16 jets, and I thought, I know that's not true because we don't have F-16 jets. We've got F-18s that are, almost 50 years old now. I learned from your trailer, we have trouble putting 3 boats at sea, 3 ships at sea. I think China's got, a 600-ship Navy? That image there about half of our vehicles parked in some parking lot. I remember when, I think it was Anita Anand announced that we're sending tanks to Ukraine, and I thought, we're sending tank to Ukraine because I think we have a few dozen, but most of them are not ready to rock. And they're not operationally at the same level as the other tanks that the Ukrainians are getting from America or the UK or others. It really is shocking when you look at it that way. That's decades of neglect, but there's a viciousness to it. I don't know. Seeing it all put together in that trailer, the trailer alone packs a punch.
Yeah, and just to go back to your earlier point, and 2 of the individuals interviewed for this documentary are also former members of JTF2, Canada Special Forces, and with regards to these tampon dispensers they put in male washrooms at every male washroom at every military base across the country. Put aside for a second what you might think about that from a policy perspective, but that's one thing where they seem to do it rapidly. They got the order that, the government spent the money, they got it done, they made the procurement, they delivered. But they've done all of that, all of these woke changes in record time. But when it comes to actual combat capability, when it comes to military readiness, all of that is being left further and further behind. And it comes back to I think it comes back to what the government is choosing to prioritize. And I don't think they're serious about national defense. I don't think they're serious about national security. You mentioned earlier some of the concerning revelations surrounding this government's relationship with China. And what's really frustrating is when it comes, in my opinion, when it comes down to for the federal government, there should be no higher priority than national security and national defense. I mean, that is what the federal government was originally put there to facilitate. And it seems to be really an afterthought at best for the current administration.
One more thing, I was thinking of that statement by Bill Blair about training. We used to have an annual sort of NATO air training event in Cold Lake, Alberta. I think it was called Maple Flag, if I'm going correctly. And it was an annual thing, and all the NATO countries came, and we practiced flying together, and it was sort of like a Top Gun. In Canada, I think they canceled that about 6 years ago and said, we're improving our systems, we'll be back even better. I don't think it's ever come back. So that was a chance for all the NATO pilots to come to Canada, to be on our turf, to meet us, to be friends, to go out for beers afterwards, and for us to learn from the best of the best. That's just part of history, and without any fanfare, they can't do it. We don't have the equipment, we don't have the budget, and why? If you're NATO, why would you go to Cold Lake, Alberta, instead of to Poland, or to some place where they think about the military, to the UK? I mean, whatever you think about the Russia-Ukraine war, that's the hot spot. We're not even serious. We're a million miles away from serious. I don't think we do that Maple Flag thing anymore, do we?
Well, it's actually worse than that, Ezra. Not only are we not holding these kinds of exercises, for the first time ever, NATO held Allied air exercise in Europe, and there were only two NATO countries that weren't able to go, and it was Canada, because we didn't have any planes that we could send, and Iceland, which doesn't have an air force. So that is kind of the state of affairs right now. Again, a country of 40 million, second largest country in the world, and we have, I've been told from sources within the Air Force, 12 jets that are ready to go. Again, a country of 40, we have the second largest country in the world, a vast Arctic region that's, by the way, full of some amazing people and tremendous economic opportunity. But when it comes to sovereignty, use it or lose it at a certain point. The Americans have over 20,000 combat troops in the Arctic. Obviously, they just have Alaska up there. Russia's got more than 30,000. We have less than 300, and they're all sitting in offices in Yellowknife. So it's a sad state of affairs, unfortunately, but it's something that we need to turn around.
Well, I tell you, I'm so glad you made this movie. I would be glad that you made this movie if you were just Aaron Gunn, good guy. But now you're Aaron Gunn, Conservative Party candidate in North Island, Powell River. And listen, nothing's done till it's done. You got to win the election. The Conservative Party has to win the most votes, and Pierre Poilievre has to invite you into cabinet. But you are an articulate and reasonable spokesman using your words, but you also have that dark art of being able to marshal cinema, which is a rare thing for people on our side of the aisle. I look forward to whatever your role will be. I mean, in your trailer, it reminds me of the other work you've done, such as Vancouver is Failing. Is that what it's?
Dying. Yeah.
Dying. Vancouver, which was about the inner city and the drugs, which is just a mess. So I feel like you've got a variety of areas of expertise. I didn't know you were former military man yourself. You served 3 years in the reserve. I didn't know that. I'm excited to see where you are, quote, deployed in cabinet, because I think that you will be there, and I think that that's a very good thing for Canada. You're a good storyteller, but they're stories with a point. You're waking us up and you're pointing out things we need to improve. I'm really excited about this. And we haven't even talked about some of the things that trailer shows, like the MAID, the medical assistance in dying, which goes to the morality of this. I mean, just the cultural abuse, the Trudeau Liberals, their answer to veterans is euthanasia instead of actually helping them. Let me just throw you one more thing. I think the essential moment where Trudeau really showed who he is, and sometimes Trudeau will speak the truth if he's sort of not prepared, and he just answers honestly without thinking of a briefing note. We saw that when he was asked what his favorite country was other than Canada. That was actually a great question. And he said, China, I admire their basic dictatorship. He was being bloody honest. And the other was when a Canadian veteran who was wounded asked him about, why are you fighting us in court? And that's an iconic clip. Here, take a look at this. He showed us who he was, didn't he? Take a look.
Back in August 24th, 2015, you made the promise, and I'll quote it here, "No veteran will be forced to fight their own government for the support and compensation they have earned." Yet you are still currently in a legal battle with veterans regarding equal support and compensation to their peers. As you can tell, we have two standard of veterans who fought in the same war. The ones prior to 2006 and the ones after 2006. There are two standards. One on the old Pension Act and one under this new lump sum or soon to be lifetime pension option. Which, by the way, Mr. Prime Minister, by what you just said here, through my own determination, I'm still at work. So technically, by what you said just a little while ago, I don't qualify for. Sorry.
So my question is... Thank you for being here. Thank you for your courage.
So my question is to you, Mr. Prime Minister, what veterans were you talking about? Because you have ISIL or ISIS members coming into a reintegration program. You did a backdoor deal with Omar Khadr with not even stepping into the courtroom. So again, my question is, what veterans were you talking about? Was it the ones that fought for the freedoms and values that you so proudly boast about, or was it the ones who fought against? Because honestly, Mr. Prime Minister, I was prepared to be injured in the line of duty when I joined the military. Nobody forced me to join the military. I was prepared to be killed in action. What I wasn't prepared for, Mr. Prime Minister, is Canada turning its back on me. So which veteran was it that you were talking about?
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your passion and your strength and being here today to share this justifiable frustration and anger with me and with all of us here. Thank you for having the courage to stand here, and thank you for listening to my answer. On a couple of elements you brought up. First of all, why are we still fighting against certain veterans groups in court? Because they are asking for more than we are able to give right now. They are asking for more than we... Well, no, hang on. You're asking for honest answers.
Now, you met that guy. He's in your movie. Give me 1 minute on that before we say goodbye.
Yes, Brock Blaschuk. He's an incredible. He's the real deal. He's an incredible warfighter. He talked the talk and he walked the walk. He signed up to serve his country when the country was at war. He got deployed to Afghanistan, and near the end of the tour, he stepped on a Taliban IED that severely. He lost his leg and severely flatlined multiple times on his way back to Canada. And he's a warrior, but what's so sad and so frustrating to me is, it's one thing when you sign up in the country, that you're going to fight the enemies of Canada. In this case, the Taliban. But what you don't sign up for is having to fight your own government once you get home. I mean, he's had to fight for recognition from Veterans Affairs that his disability is permanent.
Oh my God!
He lost his leg.
Oh my God! You know, Trudeau's got money for every bloody thing. There's nothing he won't throw money at, whether it's a foreign manufacturer of electric vehicles, billions, tens of billions. But a guy who gave his limb for this country, well, they're asking for more than we can give. I tell you, if you do form the government and if you do have a say in things, and if it happens to be in matters military, I say you take that guy, Brock, what's his last name again?
Blaschek.
You take him and you make him the veterans ombudsman, or you make him you put that guy in the deciding role, make him a decider, put him right in the heart of things to wake up all those bloody bureaucrats. Don't you think that would be a poetic purpose for Brock?
That sounds like a great idea to me, Ezra.
Put him right in the middle. No one would understand veterans more than him. And what a rebuke it would be to a decade of abuse from Justin Trudeau. That's just my suggestion box item to you, Aaron.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I hope he's a true warfighter and Canadian hero, and he deserves better than this.
All right, well, I'm very excited about this movie. The best way to see it is on YouTube. Again, it's called Forsaken Warriors, how Trudeau broke Canada's military. But where there's life, there's hope. And I do hope that the government that I believe will come into office next year will stop the decay, stop the abuse, take those tampon dispensers out, and maybe refill our military with respect, a sense of purpose, and the resources they need. Aaron Gunn, good luck to you. I really hope you make your way into Parliament. I think you would be a great addition and a great asset to this country.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for having me, Ezra.
It's our pleasure. There you have it, Aaron Gunn. Stay with us. More ahead.
This free episode of the Ezra Levant Show is brought to you by...
Hello everyone! Hello all Rebel fans! Rebel News Live is back and will be soon happening in Calgary. Are you coming? Because I'm going to be there and I would love to see all of you and meet new faces. This year, we are heading to Calgary on October 5th for a fun full day of interesting conversations and of course, great food too. It's my favorite event of the year and I know you won't want to miss it. You will be able to meet and hear from your favorite Rebel journalist and many special guests. And today, we have the honor to feature Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. You can get your ticket and see all the details at rebelnewslive.com. So, see you in Calgary. Love you all.
Hey, welcome back. Your letters to me. The first one is on Liberals spending $3 million attending international film festivals. Must be nice. Trevor Malik says, remember when they shamed a conservative over a glass of orange juice? You're talking about Bev Oda. And she ordered an orange juice from the hotel minibar. And you know, the hotel minibars are probably the most expensive square foot in the world. To charge $16 for an orange juice is insane. But she did that, and she billed that to taxpayers, and she was sacked over it. Well, I mean, we're reading about corruption in $16 million and $16 billion terms now. Bring back Bev Oda, I have to say. Tom Cotter says, the federal firearm buyback program has cost taxpayers nearly $67.2 million since it was announced in 2020, but it still hasn't collected a single gun. I saw that statistic, and I thought, you know what? That's almost the identical amount of money that the Liberals spent on the ArriveCan app. And I don't know if you remember, but there was sort of a team of amateur hackers who recreated, like they built from scratch, an ArriveCan app replica in like a weekend's work, like the kind of thing that a consulting firm would charge tens of thousands of dollars for, not $60+ million. Now, we have since learned the whole thing was a fraud, a corrupt scam to wring out money from taxpayers. And I got to say, $60 million for the Arrive scam, corruption scheme, $60 million for a buyback program that hasn't bought anything back. I want to know who's the Liberal spouse who's getting all the money, who's the Liberal lobbyist. One thing I hope Pierre Poilievre does if he becomes prime minister, and I think he will, what I hope he does is have a retroactive, deep forensic audit, not out of vengeance, but we have to reset the moral center of this country. Under Justin Trudeau, it was clear, take what you can, get away with what you can. And we have to change the morality back to Stephen Harper. I mean, I don't know if Bev Oda should have been sacked over a $16 orange juice, but I'd much rather have a government that was that paranoid about overspending or waste than Trudeau's government where he fire hoses money and it always seems to wind up in his friends' pockets. That's our show for today. Until Monday, on behalf of all of us here at Rebel World Headquarters to you at home, good night and keep fighting for freedom.